Hi everyone, it's Lisa from My Dream in Soap. Welcome to my channel and thanks for dropping by. Now today's soap is my entry for the December 2020 soap challenge that's hosted by Amy Warden. Now for this month we had to do the super fun technique, the Lollipop Swirl, which was created by Mater Sam. I'm going to leave a link to the original video with this technique in the description below, so you can go and have a look at that as well. Now as normal, we had two categories for the challenge. In the beginner category, people had to produce a lollipop swirl in a column mould, just as seen in the original video. For the advanced category, we had to produce a lollipop swirl, but in addition to that, we had to enclose it in something else. Now that could be taking our lollipop swirl and maybe using it as an embed in another soap. Or we could pipe around the outside of the lollipop swirl, maybe use soap dough or a rim or something. It didn't really matter what we did, we just had to do something around the outside of the lollipop. We couldn't cut it or distort it or chop the lollipop up in any way. So I decided that I wanted to do a rim around my lollipop, and I wanted to do quite a specific rim. I wanted to do a proper poured rim, you know, the ones that you make first, you put them inside the mould and then pour the rest of your soap into them. But I didn't want that rim to be either plain or just some sort of basic swirl. I actually wanted a specific pattern, a nice sort of uniform design around it. So that's what I set out to do. So come on, let's go and make some soap. I started my soap by making the rim that I wanted to fit on the inside of my column mould. So I've just made some sort of flower shaped tubes, and I'm going to do the sort of reverse embed technique. I'm not really sure what its technical name is, but that's what I always call it. So basically I'm going to use something to make some negative space, pour the bulk of the soap around it, and then pull out my little tubes and then fill those in with soap. So all I'm doing here is, as you can see, I've got a little piece of paper underneath my mould, and that's done to the length that I need to wrap inside my column mould. I've mapped out the design that I want, and I just want to have some flowers going all the way around the rim of my soap. And I'm just taking here some cocoa butter that's been melted, and I'm using that to stick those little cylinders down. Now I did think about several ways of doing this rim. I do always, if I'm going to do a rim, like to do it in a loaf mould. I find doing it in a slab mould just makes the whole rim, when you try and slice it thinly, far too unwieldy. So I'd rather do a normal loaf mould and then join my rim, and that will be where I would cut my bars anyway, so that would be fine. The other way I could have possibly done it would be to maybe extrude these flower shapes and put those into some soap and make the soap all in one go. Now the reason I didn't go for that option is because I was really conscious that I was going to take this rim and I was going to bend it round in a circle. So I wanted to think about the best way that I was going to adhere the flower shapes to the rest of the rim. And I felt with using soap dough that it was quite likely that when you bent everything round, because they were two soaps made at two different times and all that sort of thing, there was more chance of getting some sort of splitting away in that rim. I'm going to be using electric blue from You Make It Up for the base colour of my rim. Now this is going to be a little bit dark, so I'm going to tone that back a little bit with some titanium dioxide. Now this part of the pour, the main base of the rim, is just going to be one single colour. So therefore I'm just going to take the mica and add it directly to the oil and disperse it into the soap that way. I do always find this a good way to do it if you are doing a single colour soap, because you can get that mica mixed in without affecting the trace at all, because obviously every time you blend after you've added lye, you are then mucking around and thickening your trace. One thing to bear in mind though, if you do add your mica to your oils, it is quite a bit more difficult to spot when you've actually got an emulsion in your batter, so you do need to be confident that you can spot that. Now for this pour, I'm not too concerned about spotting the exact point of emulsion because I don't need to keep my batter super fluid. All I just need is that it's fluid enough so that it will flow into all the little shapes on those flower embeds that I've put into the mould. If you let it get too thick, then obviously you're not going to get the nice pattern that you need on this rim. Now once I'm happy that I've got to a trace, I'm just going to adjust that colour with a little bit of titanium dioxide and then add in my fragrance oil. Now the fragrance oil I'm using is Raspberry Lemonade from Nature's Garden. I've chosen this fragrance oil for a few reasons really. First of all, I really like the smell of it. It's lovely and fruity and you can sort of almost smell the fizz in it, as it were. Probably the most important reason is that it's a super slow moving fragrance oil. And when we come to actually pouring the lollipop itself, you need that slow fragrance oil. You can't have your trace accelerating up, otherwise you won't have lovely smooth lines in your lollipop pour. And then my third reason is that for this fragrance oil, the assessment that I have linked with it gives me some nice fun colours that I can use that really suit the lollipop theme. And then with my soap batter that's still reasonably fluid, I'm just going to pour that straight into my loaf mould. Now I have actually done a little bit more soap batter than I actually need, and that's because I'm going to do a little tester piece so that I can try and see when the right time is to lift out these little sort of embed bits without the rest of the soap collapsing. And on top of that, I could do with some soap dough in this colour as well. Now I do really want to make sure that this soap is going to gel. Having it gelled will give it a more flexible quality, and we need that for our rim. So I'm going to cover it and insulate it and pop it in the oven to get it to set up. So here we are a little while later with that tester I was doing, and I'm just going to see if I'm at the point where I can remove that embed column and have a nice clean hole left behind. Can you see at this point, even though I can remove it quite successfully, the suction involved in removing it causes the rest of the soap to close in on itself. Now I did leave this several times and kept trying it, and I just kept having the same result. The hole just kept closing in on itself because of the suction when I pulled the embed out. So in the end, I've had to change my plan and just let this soap go fully through gel and set up properly, and then I can just remove them in the normal way. So here's our rim soap after it's all set up. Now this isn't fully saponified, this is literally about, I'd say about 8 or 9 hours later, but my soap is nicely set. I deliberately didn't want this to get to the stage where it's fully saponified, because remember, I want to fill in those holes, and this soap is still really soft. So this will give us a really good chance to get those flowers to adhere to the rest of the soap, because we need that, don't we? Because we're going to have to bend it in a thin rim. So I've made up some soap batter that I'm going to colour to fill in my flowers. Now, I've actually made this soap batter up a lot hotter than I normally would. I would typically always soap between 80 and 90 degrees. Now the reason why I'm doing it hotter now is because the blue soap that's in my mould is actually still pretty warm. It hasn't finished saponification yet. So the last thing I want to do is tip some cold soap into the middle of that. So therefore this soap here is around about 120 degrees, which is pretty hot for me. I am still using the same fragrance oil, that raspberry lemonade, but as you can see, the increase in the temperature has actually caused my soap to thicken up reasonably quickly, actually. So it's sort of a little bit of a play-off in that I want this to be nice and hot so it adheres well, but I'm now going to have to contend with perhaps some soap batter that's a bit thicker than I'd actually want. So I just need to really make sure that I get it into all of those flowers nicely and make sure I don't get any air pockets. And once I'm happy that they're all filled in, I'll then cover it again and pop it back in the oven. I will actually turn my oven back on just for a few minutes up to 70 degrees C, 170 F, just to again try and trigger that gel phase in the flowers this time. So here's my soap the next day. Now it hasn't been a full 24 hours, it's probably been about sort of 12-15 hours since I poured those flowers. So I'm just going to run it through my loaf splitter and actually just plane off some very thin layers to make the rim. Each time I cut a slice off, I'm going to make sure I take it and wrap it in some cling wrap so it doesn't dry out. And then I'll take a bit of that, I think it's called Corex, you know, that plastic stuff, but it doesn't matter what it is, and just put that underneath the soap and lift it up about, I think it's about 4mm, plane off another bit, and then repeat the process until I've got all the rims that I need. I then just took my rims and trimmed them to the length that I need, and as you can see I've kept them covered in a plastic bag. This plastic bag seems to be my perennial plastic bag. I seem to have had it for so long. It's the bag that I use whenever I do anything with soap dough, and I use it to roll out my soap dough, so I just keep on and on and on reusing it. So all I'm just doing here is trying to get some sort of gentle bend in this soap. Now if you do this with your soap, you need to make sure it's warm. So I have actually popped this into the oven just for about 10 minutes on a really, really low setting. I kind of just want this sort of slightly warmer than, you know, if you hold something in your hands and warm something up. I just want to stop it being brittle. And then I'm just going to take a knife and trim those overlapping parts around the rim. And then I'll spend a little bit of time just making sure I've sealed all of those edges so I don't get any leakage in the soap. And then once that's done, I'm just going to pop it back into a plastic bag so that that rim doesn't dry out. So onto the actual lollipop pour now, and I'm using the same colours as I used for the flowers in my rim. So I've got some neon pink and some neon yellow, they're from Mike and Mama, and some purple heart from You Make It Up, and then just some titanium dioxide to make these a little bit more pastel in shade. Now we've done the hard bit with the rim, but I guess we're on to the sort of nervy bit, as it were, because I've put so much effort into making that rim. The last thing I want to do is to do some shockingly bad pour down the middle and muck up all my efforts. So I've mixed up my soap batter, and again I've gone to soaping cool, so I'm actually soaping just barely above 80 degrees F here, and I've really got this to the very lightest of trace. Because remember, for this pour we need to keep everything fluid, and it's better to actually start off with a trace that may be a tiny bit too thin to start, because you don't want it thickening up as you get to the top, and you tend to still get a fairly good pattern even with a pretty light trace, whereas as soon as your trace starts to get thick and a bit blobby, then your pattern gets destroyed and you get very wobbly layers and stripes around your lollipop. And now for the actual pour itself. I find these beakers that I've got really helpful for this type of pour. Now, they aren't a beaker, in fact. All they are is the bottoms that I've cut off some bottles. They're actually old lye bottles, and I find them really useful because they're a great size if you've got a small amount of soap. And also, as you can see here, you can squeeze them and really control the flow of that batter much better than you can in a jug. So as you do your pour, you want to actually make sure you're pouring down the side wall of your mould or your rim here. And that's just to slow the speed of the batter. And therefore it should sort of pool at the bottom and spread out, rather than dropping through and making some sort of weird drop swirl. And then just gradually working your way round the mould and making sort of the next pour point so it lands at the base where the previous sort of pool of soap attaches to the side. So I'll just carry on doing that until I've reached the top of my mould. Now when I calculated my batter, I did actually deliberately make more than I needed. And the reason I did that is because I wanted that as I completed the pour, the batter still to flow nicely. You know, when you've got a lot of batter in a jug, it pours out easily, doesn't it? When you've only got a little bit left, it's really difficult to make it pour nicely. And we know the key thing for a lollipop is to have a nice, smooth, consistent pour. Now if you don't want any extra batter, you don't need any soap dough or any extra little soaps, then that's fine. But just accept that perhaps your last soap may not be as nice as the other ones because you're not going to have such a lovely fluid pour from the sort of the dregs of the batter left in your jug. And then once again, when we're finished, I'm just going to cover the top. It doesn't really matter too much if we cover the top here because we're going to have to plane that bit off anyway. And once again, just leave it to saponify. I am going to force gel on the inside as well. So again, back into the oven to C-pop overnight. And here's our soap the next day, unmoulded. Now you can see the joins aren't perfect, but that's fine because that's where I've decided I'm going to be cutting my soap anyway. Now these round soaps do make a slightly smaller bar, so therefore I'm cutting them a bit wider. I'm actually cutting them at 3 centimetres, and that's how I've actually designed my rim to have them cut at that point. And I must admit, I'm really relieved that that swirl's come out nicely because, as I said previously, that was quite a lot of effort on the rim and it would have been a nightmare to have mucked up and had a horrible swirl in the middle. And then finally, here are our final soaps after they've all been cleaned up. I hope you enjoyed this video and you like the soap.
If you have, it would be great if you left me a thumbs up. If you've got any questions or queries, then please leave them in the comments section below. And if you'd like to see what I'm making in the future, why not subscribe to my channel? Thanks for watching everyone. Happy soaping!